What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, and Dalton, Wasserman here with you guys. Once again, okay, we're not grading games, we're not grading players, but it's still an extremely exciting time of the football calendar, and the reason why is because it's team building season, baby. We got free agency coming up in a couple of weeks. Obviously, the draft is about a month and a half after free agency opens, so what better way to dive into team building season than talk about some team needs specifically? We're going to go through every single team in the NFL here and give you the top 3 needs that we see pre-free agency. So we'll talk a little bit about, okay, why we think that's the case. We'll go over some PFF overall grades for maybe specific players, maybe specific units in each team. We'll talk about some free agents a little bit, spend a little bit more time on some teams than others because we think that they might be the ones that could really change a lot of what's going on. But Dalton, how you doing, my friend? Before we dig into it, I know you're fresh off of Mardi Gras, which I'm extremely jealous of because New Orleans is one of my favorite places in the world, and you were there for like 4 days, so it's 4 days of New Orleans food, just back to back to back to back. So how you doing, my friend? You ready for this one?
Absolutely, Trev. I'm absolutely stuffed. I don't need to take any time out for the next probably week to eat anything, that's for sure. I think it's the best food town on the planet, and I ate absolutely everything all weekend. So if you see me sinking in this chair at all during the show, you'll know exactly why.
And it's well-deserved, because that's how you have to do New Orleans. So if you had any leftovers, honestly, I feel like you would have been doing it wrong anyway. So let's dig into this. We got a lot of teams, a lot of things to get to here for this episode. And let's start with the AFC West. We'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs, the top 3 pre-free agency needs that we had for this team. We got running back, we got secondary, and then we also have defensive line. Dalton, is there a specific point for any of those that you kind of wanted to make as we're looking at the Chiefs trying to bounce back from what was obviously a down year considered where they are in their dynasty and in their winning window?
I think running back is obviously going to be in the spotlight, right, with Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, both free agents, and they weren't very explosive in the run game at all this past season. So there's going to be different speculation as far as who are they looking at, whether it be in free agency if they can clear up enough money, or in the draft with a certain Jeremiah Love with that 9th overall pick. If he's available, would he be the pick there? And how much do they supplement themselves in free agency in case Jeremiah Love is not there? Thought to be one of the best players in the draft. Could even go one pick before them to the Saints. How does the draft board fall? So to me, it's very interesting with the Chiefs, depending again on how much cap space they can clear. Patrick Mahomes obviously restructured his contract to help him out with that. There's still more to go when it comes to that process. But I think big names, if they can create enough cap room, like Kenneth Walker from Seattle, like Breece Hall from the Jets, maybe Javonte Williams from the Dallas Cowboys. The Chiefs are going to be in the running back market this offseason and probably picking up multiple players.
Yeah, and I think when people look at the Kansas City Chiefs and them being over the cap right now, even after the Mahomes deal, they might be like, whoa, okay, Kansas City's kind of in trouble here. They're really not. I mean, when you look at the way that their cap is structured, they can get another $22 million from Chris Jones, restructuring him, another 12 from Trey Smith, another 8 from Creed Humphrey, another 7.9 from George Karlaftis. So they will be fine. They will have some money to be able to go out and get some of those players. But yeah, I mean, defensive line, I think finding somebody to play next to Chris Jones and complement George Karlaftis, I think is going to be really important for this team. And then, with Steve Spagnuolo potentially losing guys like Jalen Watson, Josh Williams, have they been like the shutdown CB1 types of players? No, but I think there's a certain type of bigger aggressive man coverage corner that Spags likes to utilize. And maybe they'll be able to bring back one of those guys, but if either of those guys really leave in free agency, I think that's something that they've got to got to seriously think about as well, because the depth and the type of corners that they have are what really gives you the flexibility to do a lot of different things. And that's Spags defense that was able to help them win some championships. But yeah, running back's the thing that people are going to talk the most about. But I think defensive line is probably the next main point. Like when you talk about that number 9 overall pick, I think defensive line sort of comes into the equation there for them. But then secondary, depth in the secondary, very interested to see how free agency plays out for them there. Los Angeles Chargers, 3 needs that we have here for the Chargers. First one is very, very obvious, and it's the interior offensive line. Edge defender as well, with Odafe Owe and Khalil Mack as free agents. And then tight end potentially for them as well. They were only 29th in the NFL this past year at receiving grade from the tight end position. Or that might have been overall grade. Was that overall grade? Because you had the notes for this one. Is this overall grade for them, or is it just receiving grade for tight end?
The tight ends there, that's overall, because I think they could really use some help on the blocking side as well.
Yeah, so interior offensive line, though, I mean, that's where everybody's going to go to first when it comes to the Chargers.
No, absolutely. You talk about the worst offensive line overall in football by almost 10 points. The interior is the real problem here. Hopefully you get Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt both back healthy at the tackle spot, so you don't really have to worry about that. But if it's me, I'm looking at the top of the free agent market. I think my number 1 free agent target for the Chargers would be the center from Baltimore, Tyler Linderbaum. I think it'd be a perfect fit in Mike McDaniel's offense. It fixes your center problem. It takes away something that you would have to do in the draft. And I think this interior class in the draft is pretty underrated, right? We've been talking about some guard targets for them there, but I think at least 2 free agent signees are going to be necessary, and I would look right at the top of Tyler Linderbaum to take over that center spot.
He's going to be one of many teams that are going to be vying for Tyler Linderbaum's services ultimately. I don't think that he gets away from Baltimore, but of course, I think this is a really good spot for them. For the Denver Broncos, a team that's so close to the Super Bowl, came up just short. Linebacker, I think, is a big team need for them. Alex Singleton, Justice Journaux, those guys pending free agents, and just linebacker in general. I feel like the second level they could certainly improve on a defense that was really, really good, but that's an area where they could continue to improve. Running back, potentially an unknown for them going into the next season, and then tight end as well, right? Didn't really emphatically answer that tight end spot. They brought in Evan Ingram, but is he the long-term answer for them? Are they going to try to go get one of these tight ends in this draft class when it's really deep tight end draft class? Could even be in the first round, but overall, any thoughts, main thoughts there with linebacker, running back, and then tight end as the top 3 needs that we had for them pre-free agency?
I think one of the themes you saw for me, again, late in the season, after J.K. Dobbins got hurt, the running game really went flat. And right now, I believe R.J. Harvey is their only running back under contract for 2026. And I like R.J. Harvey. I like him a lot better as a complementary piece. It would not shock me. Denver's got an underrated amount of cap space here. It would not shock me if they are also at the top of the running back market with looking for a Kenneth Walker or a Breece Hall. They need to get a little bit more explosive. Again, I like Harvey a lot, but I don't think he's that solo workhorse that you're looking for like some of the best backs in the game. I think he can be a solid 50-50 type of piece. They might look at the top of the running back market to add some balance to this offense.
Raiders were the team that I really wanted to spend the most time on here with this division specifically, because for the 3 team needs, we got offensive line just in general with a lot of unknown about who's going to be there on the offensive line with Jordan Meredith and Dylan Parham, both free agents coming up in a couple of weeks. Wide receiver as well. No player on this team with over 700 receiving yards last season, so we knew that was going to be something that they were going to target. And then just overall the defense. You have written here in the notes 49.2 team overall defensive grade, which was dead last in the NFL. They've got a lot of cap space to work with. $76.9 million in effective cap space. That's the 3rd most in the NFL. So John Spytek's kind of licking his chops about how he could change this team. That's all without throwing in a potential Max Crosby trade. And just, Dalton, when I look at the Raiders, I talked about how Parham and Meredith, okay, those guys are free agents upcoming. Perhaps there could be a lot of change on the offensive line if they really wanted to make that, because the offensive line really took a step back last season. But you look at the defense. I mean, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 starters on that defense. Again, not even including Max Crosby, that are unrestricted free agents that could leave in free agency. So Spytek really has a big decision to make here with what's going on with Crosby, because you've got to figure that Crosby is going to fetch a first-round pick plus, right? I don't know, it might be 2 first-round picks, but Spytek really has the opportunity to completely reset this team, especially with them picking at number 1 overall. We know that they're going to get Fernando Mendoza. Are you just completely resetting everything from this team, really tearing down whatever the old regime was? Because you can do that if you let a lot of these guys walk. You let a lot of new players come in with that new coaching staff as well, with Clint Kubiak now as the head coach. You've got so much flexibility here with Las Vegas. How savage, I'll say, do you think they're going to be with their roster rebuild here?
I think on defense especially, they need to be extremely savage, as you call it, because they've got to rebuild the entire thing. I mean, you could argue they're going to need a complete remodel at all 3 levels. And look, I think if a Buffalo or a New England, a team like that late in the first round offers you a first-round pick plus for them, you take it and run, right? Crosby obviously wants to win a championship. He wants to play somewhere he can do that. And the Raiders are just not going to be equipped to do that in the next 2 to 3 years, right? They've got to build this entire roster. The good news is, you know who your quarterback is in Fernando Mendoza. You know you have Ashton Ginty, you have Brock Bowers, you have Colton Miller at left tackle. You've got some really key pieces on the offensive side of the ball to build around. I think the interior offensive line, you mentioned some of those free agents, that's going to be a big concern. I fully expect them to add at least 1 wide receiver on day 2 of this draft to go along with Mendoza and some of the other young guys that they have, but the defense is going to be the big task. It wouldn't shock me if a lot of the free agent money is spent for the Raiders on defense, and then they're going to have to add multiple pieces in this draft on that side of the ball as well. So there's a lot that Clint Kubiak and John Spytek really need to work on with this roster, but at the very least offensively, there are some key pieces to build around.
I just look at so many needs for a team that is already changing coaching staffs. Like, it's for as incredible as of a player as Max Crosby is. I think I'm with you. If you have the opportunity to trade, certainly for 2 first-round picks, but a first-round pick plus, reset the whole team, man. I mean, just go ahead and do it, and really just over the next couple of years, build the team the way that you want to, with Clint Kubiak having so much control over the types of players, the specific players that he's going to have on his team. And so I'm with you, man. I feel like they should absolutely hit the gas and hit that reset button as hard as they possibly can, because they have a really good opportunity to be able to do that. Let's move to the NFC West next for our next team here. Start with the Arizona Cardinals. Offensive line, felt like the interior offensive line could have really used an upgrade just overall this past season. We know that Jonah Williams, their right tackle, likely is not going to be their starting right tackle, with him being a free agent upcoming. They had an overall PFF grade on the offensive line of just a 62.3. That was 27th in the league. Linebacker also something that they could address. And then the long-term outlook at running back. I'm glad that you included this one here as one of these positions to talk about here for Arizona, because I think offensive line's the obvious one for them. But then I also agree, linebacker and then running back, I think are points that we have to talk about here with them.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear that. We got some background on the off to the side here. But no, I agree with you. I think Mike LaFleur is going to want to go in here and work on...
I was gonna say I can't hear it. Did it stop or no?
The guy, I don't know. The guys decided to turn on the Olympics or something off to the side here. They're really hooked.
I will talk about these positions then.
They're really hooked on. I think they're hooked on the skiing with the Olympics. That's all they're watching back there behind the glass. But anyway, Arizona. I got you. Arizona Cardinals. I'm with you. The offensive line's a big concern. We've even seen mock drafts lately where we've seen guys like Francis Mauigoa or Spencer Fano drafted, and I think that right tackle spot to me is the big one that they could go after with that number 3 overall pick if they don't add a defensive player. So no, certainly I think Mike LaFleur knows he needs to build this thing in the trenches. And you mentioned it at running back, finding the future there. I would not be shocked if they attack that position on day 2. You saw when their run game really kind of got derailed after James Conner got hurt this year.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a matter of, do you believe that Trey Benson's the guy, right? How much do you believe in Trey Benson? Because if not, you could definitely make some noise and get a new running back in there. I think they are going to bring a new running back in there. It's just a matter of what type of resource they throw there. San Francisco 49ers, man, despite so many additions on the defensive line last year, it still looked like their defensive line was not what it needed to be. Now, I know that you're hoping that Michael Williams, even coming off of the injury, takes a step forward in his sophomore season in the NFL. The same with CJ West, the same with Alfred Collins. But, man, I think that if you've got the ability to upgrade on the defensive line, if you're the 49ers, you got to think about it. Their 46.5 overall PFF grade was dead last in the NFL, as you noted here in our show notes. I think wide receiver as well, right? We talk about Casey Concepcion, maybe Denzel Boston, one of those guys being an option for them, the back end of the first round. And then running back as well for the Niners? Is this just hey, we've got to get somebody else in there to make sure that Christian McCaffrey doesn't have a massive workload? Is that kind of the thought process there for you?
Yeah, they need some depth at running back. Brian Robinson's a free agent. Christian McCaffrey was actually at less than 4 yards per carry this year. Obviously, I would say he's the best receiving back in football this year and, well deserving of all the accolades that he gets. But I think there are times when you see the rushing production is a little more based on volume and just how much he gets. And to be honest with you, if you want to free him up and use him as a more flexible receiving weapon anyway, I think it would be smart. Now, they've tried with some day 3 picks in prior years, but I definitely think the 49ers could stand to add some depth behind McCaffrey at running back as well. But you mentioned it. I think this defensive line, you got to improve it by any means necessary. Lowest graded D-line in the league, fewest sacks in the league this year. Nick Bosa obviously coming back, and Michael Williams coming back from injury is going to be a big help. But any way they can continue to add talent to that unit with Raheem Morris coming in there, I would expect to see even some more 5-man fronts up front in his defense. They need to add more talent on this defensive line, despite even some of the young talent they already have.
Specifically pass rushers, right? I think you look at a lot of the guys who are on the team, like Clelin Ferrell's a free agent, Yetur Gross-Matos is a free agent, but even throwing those guys in there, I mean, you got Keon White as well. We talked about Alfred Collins and CJ West and Michael Williams. So many guys that are just like, all right, they're good bodies along the defensive line. They're not really getting after the passer. Basically, the only two I think that have that high potential is Bryce Huff and then Nick Bosa, and we saw how bad it was when Nick Bosa went down. So I think most of the focus is going to come on that defensive line. We'll see what happens in free agency with them and what that looks like as we head towards the draft. For the Rams, the secondary, I think I think you correctly pointed out here in our notes that's going to be the main area of their team that they attack this offseason. I think that they were still a good enough team to win a Super Bowl this year, but you got guys like Cam Curl, Durant's a free agent, Witherspoon's a free agent, McCray's a free agent who they brought over from the trade deadline to kind of just go all in this past season. But I think secondary is huge for them. You mentioned wide receiver as well to complement Puka Nacua long-term for this team. And then offensive line, just making sure that the offensive line's as good as it can be going into next season because Matthew Stafford's coming back. Your foot's on the gas, so you got to make sure the trenches are good to go.
Yeah, I think obviously, I think on the offensive line and even at wide receiver, you're looking more towards the future, and maybe even at quarterback, you're looking towards the future if you want to draft somebody like Ty Simpson from Alabama. But if the Rams are trying to win a Super Bowl next season, they don't have too many flaws on this team. The biggest one by far, as you saw in the postseason, is the secondary. You mentioned multiple free agents. We'll see if maybe a Jalen McCullough could take over that starting safety spot from Cam Curl, or if they go on the open market there. But there's no doubt they've got to pour resources, especially into that cornerback room. It's why we have so often, mock drafted them, a Mansour Delane or even a Jermod McCoy at that number 13 overall pick. This team needs help in the secondary. It's a little bit like Philadelphia a couple years ago to me. If you can fix this secondary, you're a prime Super Bowl contender once again. The Eagles obviously doubled up at corner with Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and they won a Super Bowl. Wouldn't shock me with the Rams with their 2 first-round picks if they did that as well.
Yeah, so much flexibility with them with that number 13 overall pick to do so many different things with it. I think that Snead's going to be one of those general managers because the good ones always do this, is you fill a lot of those needs to where you feel pretty good about it, and they're going to try as much as they can to do that heading into the draft with as much flexibility as possible because, man, if they get to go best player available at 13 and 29, I think it just changes the trajectory of not just how good this team could be next season, but also in the seasons that follow. I mean, do you start thinking about quarterback then at that point? Like, does Ty Simpson come on the board for you, whether you think he's good enough to consider that at 13 or even at 29? Like, if you give yourself that best player available approach, maybe you could truly swing for the fences, get a rookie quarterback, let them sit behind Matthew Stafford, feel good about them taking over whenever Matthew Stafford does retire. So a lot of potential flexibility for the Rams, which brings us to the Super Bowl champions here with the Seattle Seahawks. When you look at their pending free agents, I mean, you look at a lot of guys in the secondary here. Kobe Bryant's a free agent. Tyreek Woolen, Josh Jobe. These guys are major playmakers and starters for them. Now, the good news is that for their Super Bowl champion, they got $59.6 million in effective cap space. That's the 6th most in the NFL. But even beyond those players in the secondary, Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker, upcoming free agent Rashid Shaheed, who they made a trade for at the deadline. Do you move on from him, or do you feel good about, hey, we got the addition that we needed to go win a ring? Are they going to continue to want to prioritize him on the roster? Boye Mafe is a pending free agent as well. But what do you think about this team, just the overall needs for them, and then some of those pending free agents there?
Yeah, you mentioned the amount of cap space is interesting because we don't often see Super Bowl champions with that much cap space to work with. I think the two guys that stick out to me are the first two guys you saw on that list. Number one, Kenneth Walker at running back. I think this is a team with as stacked with young talent as they are. I think this is a team with the luxury of being able to pay a running back like Walker, who just led the league in rushing grade and won a Super Bowl MVP. You can pay him for the duration of a 3 or 4 year contract at his age. I think that's going to be a big decision. Part of, Sam Darnold's success out here in Seattle is that they were able to run the football at the second highest rate in the NFL, and he's one of the best play action passers in the league, right? So Kenneth Walker proved in the playoffs he can be a workhorse with Zach Charbonnet out with the knee injury, and that's going to continue probably into next year. So you're going to need a starting caliber running back either way. Keeping Walker is their easiest path to getting that. And then I think Kobe Bryant's a really important player for this defense. Converted corner that moved to free safety, had a really good season back there with Julian Love. And the big thing there with keeping Bryant is that it allows Nicky Manwari to not have to move back. You can keep him in that pseudo linebacker nickel role without having to worry about moving him back to free safety and revamping the structure of Mike McDonald's defense. So I think those two guys would be the two priorities for me. And you mentioned it, we've done it so many times. The need at cornerback is there, obviously, but you've got flexibility with Devin Witherspoon. And then I think that pick in the late, number 32 actually, because they won the Super Bowl. That 32nd pick could go to a cornerback. So I think it's going to be, the secondary is going to be a big area of focus throughout the offseason. But the two guys on that list I'm trying to keep are Kenneth Walker and Kobe Bryant.
No, I agree with you completely. I think those are the two guys that I think you prioritize if you're this team. I think you're probably bringing back one of those two corners because you probably have the money to be able to do it. Maybe not both of them, but one of them. If push came to shove, I think you let Rashid Shaheed walk because he could get a pretty big bag on the open market, and you feel pretty good about having Torrey Horton as well and what he could grow into for that team. And then you let, like you said, you let the end of the first round come to you as it will. Maybe that's at cornerback. Maybe you're making an upgrade on the interior offensive line. We talked about guard maybe needing upgrade for this team. So the Seahawks are in a really good spot to, like they did previously when they won their first Super Bowl, stay competitive and make a run at it again shortly after. So they're in pretty good shape, but I do think that bringing back Kobe Bryant and Kenneth Walker, like you said, strategically just give them the highest ceiling on both sides of the ball. So I'd expect those two guys to be prioritized. AFC East, New York Jets. Quarterback, obviously the number one need here for them. What's the long-term answer at the quarterback position? Having 2 first-round picks this year, 2 second-round picks this year, 3 first-round picks next year. When are they going to pull the trigger on the quarterback? Is it going to be this draft? I don't think they're going to go the free agent market again, especially with Justin Fields still there. But 51.1 passing grade this past season, 30th in the NFL. You have offensive skill players here, and I agree. It's not a specific position of need, but it's one that has to be addressed, whether that is a tight end being able to stand out in the passing game, complementary wide receivers for Garrett Wilson. What happens with Breece Hall, right? Are you bringing him back, or are you looking for another workhorse running back somewhere if you don't believe that one is on the roster? Then overall, the defense, it was disappointing with Aaron Glenn, 26th in the NFL in overall PFF team defensive grade. The Jets got their work cut out for them. And if Darren Mucci's, their general manager, has a lot of draft picks to work with, like I mentioned, but man, it's hard to look at this roster, and it'd be a lot easier to say, hey, where are the positions that were good than the ones that we don't want to upgrade. That's just where the Jets are right now.
Yeah, pretty much everything on this team except offensive line is in pretty dire need. Now, it's going to depend in part how much they believe in certain players. Mason Taylor at tight end, like you mentioned, Adonai Mitchell at receiver, but they still could use a third threat to me in the slot. I think if somebody like Mekhi Lemon were available with the 16th overall pick, he'd be really interesting in this offense. Breece Hall is a free agent. I'm not sure that Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis is really a starting caliber option, at least yet. And this defense was really a disaster the second half of the season. So you really, I think when we have all this talk about who the Jets are drafting, you could draft just about anything and convince me that it's a good bet because this team just needs more talent all the way around.
No, there's no question about it. They absolutely do. Miami Dolphins quarterback once again for them. Tua situation completely up there. Just did not feel like he is anywhere near a long-term answer for them. It's just a matter of what's going to happen with him. We already saw them released Tyreek Hill and a couple of other players. I mean, it is totally started there in the Jeff Hafley era in Miami. They're very clearly clearing out their books and their roster spots, getting ready for new guys to come in. 27th in PFF passing grade last season, and just for Tua, whenever there has been any sort of disturbance in Plan A in the Mike McDaniel era, it just always felt like it was just catastrophic. The floor was far too low for them there. The secondary team coverage grade 23rd in the NFL, and then edge defenders as well. The pass rushing was not good for them. And this is a team that moved on from Jalen Phillips, right? They still have Bradley Chubb. They have Chop Robinson, although Chop Robinson was missed time due to injury. But getting after the passer was just not something that they were good at. And they were focused on defending the run a lot better. Kenneth Grant, Jordan Phillips, you bring those guys in because you weren't good at defending the run. Now you got to get a lot better at getting after the passer. So some major defensive line needs for this team, but secondary, defensive line, quarterback, I agree with how you outlined this one.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Dolphins are another team with just a boatload of needs. They're going through a full roster reset. They're going through a full salary cap reset. They've got to find some money here, and they don't really have a lot to spend this offseason. I think it really is. It started last offseason with some of the trades they made, but this offseason is going to really be about resetting the books and finding young talent in this draft. If you could trade away even more pieces to get more draft capital, I think that would really help them a lot. But you look all around their team, quarterback, depth at wide receiver, could use some help on the interior offensive line. Those guard spots are pretty weak. And then all around the defense, they need to find ways to improve. I think the Dolphins have a lot of different avenues they can go about improving their team, especially in the draft.
Buffalo Bills. You just had okay, we've got guard. Okay, all right, guard kind of makes sense. David Edwards, a free agent. Osiris Torrance didn't really play really well this past year. 59.5 overall PFF grade. Wide receiver, that one's the obvious one, right? There were all sorts of public drama with Keon Coleman and who's going to be the main wide receiver for this team. It just looked like Josh Allen didn't have enough help there at the wide receiver spots this past season. But then you just have defense overall for them. Now they elevate Joe Brady from that offensive coordinator spot up to head coach. They move on from Sean McDermott. And so it's going to be a little bit different of a defense, but I wonder how much overall. They were 21st in team defensive grade last season. And so my question for you just with the Bills is, when you talk about defense and needing to be better at defense, is that just an overall thing, or do you find a certain area of a defense post Sean McDermott that you really think that they need to focus on?
No, it's legitimately everything except maybe cornerback, where you've got Christian Benford and Maxwell Harrison and Taron Johnson in the slot there. Basically everything but cornerback, I think, is all completely unsettled. You look at some of the free agents they have: Joey Bosa, Daquan Jones, Matt Milano, AJ Epinesa, DeMar Hamlin back there at safety, who's been starting the last 2 years. I just think Jordan Poyer as well, who played a lot. Cam Lewis. I mean, they have so many needs to me, especially in the middle of their defense. If you told me in this draft they got, another defensive lineman inside or outside to help their pass rush, help Greg Rousseau out in the pass rush, then fine. Linebacker, they have to find somebody to play next to Terrell Bernard, especially somebody more athletic who can cover. I think middle of the field coverage has been a huge problem. Then at safety, look, I like Cole Bishop back there, but they need another starting caliber player. If you told me that was somebody like a Dylan Thieneman or an Emmanuel McNeil-Warren late in the first round, I absolutely get it. I think Jim Leonard is going to change the structure of this defense. I think they're going to get a lot more aggressive. It's going to be schematically a lot more complex like it used to be when he was running the defense down at Wisconsin at the college level, but they need talent at all three levels in the middle of their defense. I think they need to improve all three of them really fast if they want to be a true Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, Darnell Savage, Jordan Poyer, DeMar Hamlin, all those guys, unrestricted free agents coming up. They have Cole Bishop, they have Taylor Rapp, but I agree with you, man. I think that they could be looking at safety as early as the first round, and it would make a ton of sense for them on defense. They just need playmakers, I think, and they just need new DNA there on defense with Jim Leonard now as the DC for them. The New England Patriots, edge defender, tight end, an interior defensive line. So you're focusing on the defensive line here, looking at the New England Patriots, who, coming off of a Super Bowl berth, $36.4 million in effective cap space. That's just outside of the top 10. That's 11th most in the NFL. You highlighted defensive line. I mean, Kayvon Chason, Karis Tonga, both of those guys unrestricted free agents, but then I wanted to throw in Jalen Hawkins, who had a great year as a safety as well. I wonder if you bring him back to keep that continuity between him and Craig Woodson, who played so well together this season. You keep those guys together. And then tight end Austin Hooper as well. You mentioned tight end, him being an unrestricted free agent. in a couple of weeks here, and then Hunter Henry entering a contract year the next year. Thoughts overall? Just, do you have like a primary need here for the Patriots where you'd really like to see them allocate their resources, whether it's salary cap or their draft picks?
Yeah, they're definitely, I mean, the fun part with the Patriots, they do have a lot of cap space. You've got a star quarterback on a rookie contract, and you're ahead of schedule when it comes to what your roster was supposed to do. Nobody expected the Patriots, obviously, to make the Super Bowl. So now, to me, it's about, in general, finding the holes on this team where you can raise the ceiling and you can get over that hump of getting back and winning a Super Bowl next year. The one that stands out to me, honestly, is their edge rushers. And honestly, all across their defensive line, there's needs. I think they could use a run stuffer on the inside to complement Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. But off the edge, Patriots edge defenders had the lowest pass rush win rate in the NFL, and I believe it was the fourth lowest pass rush grade. This is the number one team, if he hits the open market, that if I'm them, I'm going to get Trey Hendrickson. I think that's the exact guy, the blindside edge rusher that they need to jumpstart their pass rush on the outside. Because look, interior pass rush is obviously great. They have arguably the best in football, but to add that edge complement to it, to get a superstar rusher like Trey Hendrickson and then fill all those other holes in the draft, I think would be a really good move. That's the name that I'd be looking out for if I'm New England. If he doesn't get franchise tagged again in Cincinnati, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, and they'll have edge rusher options, right? I mean, we'll talk about the Philadelphia Eagles here in a second, but like Jalen Phillips could hit the open market. We talked about Max Crosby being an option there. Trey Hendrickson's somebody that you think about, right? Like, I think you can get a good pass rusher here if you are New England, and that's with re-signing K'Lavon Chaisson, who I thought played pretty well for them this past season. So I think the Patriots have some good flexibility, and even though I think that they did jump the shark a little bit with getting back into that sustained winning window this past season, you would much rather be ahead of schedule than behind schedule, especially if you manage things correctly. So the Patriots, yeah, I know a lot of people like to bring up the schedule and how easy it was and how they made the Super Bowl, but they have an opportunity to truly be an even better team next year than they were this past season where they did make the Super Bowl. So I think things are looking up there for New England. NFC East. Let's talk about the NFC East next. I mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll save them till the end because the Eagles, I think, are the most interesting team in this division. Let's start with the New York Giants, though. Is the offensive line good enough? Is the offensive line set? Right? I think that's the most important part here. With Joe Schoen still remaining as that general manager, does he believe that he's built the offensive line the way that they need to have success next season when Malik Neighbors, when Cameron Scadaboo, when Jackson Dart are all out there? 66.3 overall grade from the non-left tackle spot. I see what you did there, obviously, because that's Andrew Thomas's spot, who we're not worried about at all whatsoever. It's just really, do they feel confident in the rest of the guys that are there? 63.3 receiving grade for this team. That was 27th in the NFL. No Malik Neighbors for a lot of it, given his ACL injury. Wan'Dale Robinson played well, but you bring back Wan'Dale Robinson with him being a free agent. And then overall, the run defense grade from this team. Just the defense overall, man. I don't know how many defensive additions we're going to get for this team, simply because they should just be a lot better than what they were last year anyways, even with the guys who are currently on the roster. So with John Harbaugh coming in, you just got to feel as though his coaching, breath of fresh air, new voice in the room, whatever you want to call it, that defense is way too talented to play as poor as they did the previous season. So I agree with you. That's definitely a need when we look back at last season, but I just don't know how many defensive additions they're honestly going to make as we stand here before free agency.
The defense might be something they attack with so much depth in this draft. I'm looking at this offensive line, though. I think John Harbaugh, I think Matt Nagy, I think they know, Joe Schoen knows that they're going to have to protect Jackson Dart, especially with as long as he holds on to the football and at times doesn't protect himself. They got to fix this offensive line. Andrew Thomas, mainstay, superstar at left tackle, but you've got Greg Van Roten, right guard is a free agent. Jermaine Illuminor has been starting at right tackle as a free agent. John Michael Schmitz has really struggled at center throughout his career. I think they're going to be looking at some big additions, maybe even a couple of guys that Harbaugh could bring over with him from Baltimore, a Tyler Linderbaum at center, a Daniel Faalele at right guard. They need to fix the other four spots on this offensive line. They've got to stabilize it. Do you need superstars necessarily? No, but it's got to be stable. You've got a superstar at left tackle. You've got to be able to protect Jackson Dart in order for this offense to work.
For the Washington Commanders, Overall defense, I mean, they were just bad. I mean, defensive line's kind of where you look. They've got some bodies on the interior defensive line, but really anything at edge rusher has to be on the table for them as a potential major upgrade. Linebacker as well. I love Frankie Louvu. Bobby Wagner has played well into his age, but is Bobby Wagner even going to be back? Do you want him to be back? Are you looking for a younger linebacker to play next to Louvu anyways? And then this is a secondary that really struggled. You've got Mike Samer still. You've got Trey Amos, but what are we playing outside of those guys? Major secondary potential upgrades for them as well. So overall team defense, I agree. Just writing defense down makes a lot of sense. And then wide receiver and tight end, right? Making sure that this group, I think there's a lot of names. There's a lot of young names. There's guys that can prove themselves, but certainly it wasn't as good last year as you needed it to be. Now, Jaden Daniels being in and out of the lineup and hurt didn't really help the overall perception or growth or view of the potential of some of those guys, but I think that I would agree with you here. Like maybe offensive line, depending on what you think about it, but the major needs are really just everything on defense. And then if you're going to do something on offense, it's going to be in that playmaker category with tight end, wide receiver for Washington.
Yeah, with so many needs on this team, we've wondered about this before. Could they try to trade down from that number 7 overall pick? They've obviously got a lack of draft capital trading for Laramie Tunsil and Deebo Samuel last year, and with so many needs that this team has, look, we saw them in an NFC title game just a year ago, right, with Jaden Daniels spearheading the whole thing. Even with a flawed team, he can overcome when he's healthy a lot of flaws on your team, but it got to be too much this year. So I think the priority for Dan Quinn has to be this defense. They can't give up 30 points a game this season upcoming. You can't ask Jaden Daniels, even as good as he is, to do that and go out and put up those sorts of points every single week. So I think any avenue of getting better for this team is going to be a good one, but the defensive side of the ball has to be a focus here.
Yeah, same thing with the Dallas Cowboys, the other team that we're talking about here, just the back 7 overall, right? The safeties, the corners, figuring out where Deron Bland is going to play and then kind of just building things out from there, right? I think they might need 2 new starting safeties on this team. Savone Revel, okay, how much faith do you have in him to be one of those outside corners for you? 30.9 team coverage grade that was worst in the NFL this past season. Running back as well with Javonte Williams, a free agent. I think that just overall the running back room, like, do you want to build it around Javonte Williams? Or are you going to look elsewhere? Are you going to, even if you bring him back, is it a committee approach type of a thing? And then offensive tackle. I know that you wrote offensive tackle, and I think that you should because Tyler Guyton, 57.8 overall PFF grade last season. Terrence Steele is 63.6. Not great in the grand scheme of things. Dalton, I feel like maybe I'm just not reading the right stuff, but I feel as though the Cowboys feel good about their offensive line. Like they feel like the offensive line is pretty good. So even though I would agree with this team need and potential upgrades, because anytime you can upgrade in the trenches, I think you should. I just don't get that vibe out of Dallas that they feel the same way for offensive tackle. But I definitely agree with the other ones of just the back 7, the coverage guys on defense, and then running back 2 for this team.
I think the tackle one it's not necessarily an immediate need, and they should feel really good about their interior. When you look at Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, and Tyler Booker, the rookie season that he had this past year, they should feel great about their interior as young as they are. The 2 tackle spots, if they're not immediate upgrades, because they may not be able to upgrade it, especially in free agency, they don't have a ton of cap space, and a lot of that would even get spent on George Pickens most likely because they absolutely have to keep George Pickens. But I think these are 2 guys that could at least be on the hot seat going into the 2026 season and could be an even bigger story next year. Otherwise, yeah, it's all about the back 7 on this defense. I'd be very shocked if they didn't come out of the first round picking number 12 and number 20 with a linebacker and a defensive back in some order. Worst coverage grade in football, giving up way too many points. And they don't need the best defense in football to succeed. If their defense is average and George Pickens stays and they still have a healthy Dak Prescott, they need an average defense to support what can be an elite offense at times. So that back 7 of that defense is going to be the focus this offseason.
So for the Eagles, now let's talk about Philly, because I think they're the most interesting team in this division. Eagles have $13 million in effective cap space right now, a couple weeks until we get to the free agent spot. That's 18th most in the NFL. A lot of the ways that Howie sometimes structures these contracts, you go, okay, well, there's going to be plenty to work with because, they're going to have a lot of restructures that they get. They don't have a lot of restructure flexibility here with these contracts. At least when I was looking it up, I could double check here in a second, but I didn't see a lot of restructure flexibility. So that kind of is what it is there for Philadelphia. And you look at some of those names that we've got there: Jalen Phillips, Josh Uche, Brandon Graham, Grant Calcaterra, Dallas Goedert, Nakobe Dean's a free agent for this team as well. Reed Blankenship, Bradley Mann, the punter. Like, I think that it's just a very interesting situation for the Eagles, who we always just think to ourselves like, oh, Howie's going to figure it out. And there's a world where Howie could certainly give these guys contracts that are very backloaded, where it's like, hey, you won't be making a lot here in these first couple of years, but you got a ton of guaranteed money that's still throughout the contract, so it doesn't matter whether you're on the team or not in a couple of years. You're good for it. It's guaranteed money. It's just going to be structured a little bit differently. So never say never when it comes to Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles, but of a lot of the players that I think that the two players that they would want to bring back the most is how well Nakobe Dean played for them, and then obviously Jalen Phillips as well and what he could be. I don't think they re-sign either of those guys. I think both of those guys walk. I think they get more money elsewhere because you just drafted Jahad Campbell, so you're not feeling the loss of Dean as much. And then when it comes to Jalen Phillips, like I just think he's going to price himself out. I think that there's going to be another team out there that's going to give them more money. So Philly's just a very interesting team here of what they're going to do because, like I said, we always convince ourselves that Howie's going to figure it out, but with an extra third-round pick, with an extra fourth-round pick, and with an extra fifth-round pick, with these projected comp picks that they have this year, I think that you could see them let a lot of these guys walk and just focus on the draft to try to get some of these younger guys to fill those spots.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be really building from within, and what you're going to see from them in free agency is probably a good amount of one-year contracts. And this is, we don't even know necessarily 100% if Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson are going to play next season. So, I mean, that would be another issue. If their offensive line starts crumbling, then you have a real problem here. I also think Dallas Goedert would be a big loss. If they can find a way to keep him, they're really barren in that tight end room without him. And, maybe they could take like a Kenyon Sadiq in the first round, but that tight end position is so important to this offense, especially with the RPOs and the way that they want to run things through those guys. They need to figure out at that spot, what their offense is going to look like. If we saw with their offense this year, when they got heavier and had more tight ends on the field, they were more efficient, but are they going to even have the personnel to be able to do it, or do they have to open it up more? And then what does that look like for the run game? So I think especially offensively, there's a lot of questions for this Eagles team going into the offseason.
I think so too, and I also think that you bring up a good point about a lot of the one-year contracts because kind of feels like Nick Sirianni enters the year on the hot seat, right? I mean, you already went through a situation where this past year didn't go to plan for you anyways. Things are starting to come out about some of the drama within the coaching staff and all that kinds of stuff. Then you go through a lot of the hiring process, and it felt like the Eagles were just getting left at the altar for some of these coaches that they really wanted. And so I wonder if you get into a situation where, yeah, there's some obvious core guys on the roster that you'll keep around, but does Howie set things up to where, okay, if they want a much bigger type of reset and the flexibility for that in 2027 with a potential new coach, does Howie factor that into what could be this offseason? I don't think he's going to, not make the roster good. I'm not trying to say any of that, but do you focus a little bit more on those one-year contracts than necessarily trying to give a lot of money to some players who would be around for 3, 4, 5 years? I'm never sure with Howie Roseman because he always figures it out, but this is going to be a challenge for them, and so we will see. Our game plan of the week this week, presented by Western Southern Financial Group, a game plan for your financial future. Dalton, the game plan of the week for me is what we talked about with the Las Vegas Raiders and potentially having the ability to fully reset their team. New head coach in Clint Kubiak, a totally new coaching staff there, a new direction, a new vibe, a new voice, and you've got the ability to, you already have a lot of your past starters on the offensive line. You got 2 of them, and then 6 of their starters on the defensive side of things are unrestricted free agents in a couple of weeks. You throw in a potential Max Crosby trade as well, and it could be a total reset with Fernando Mendoza at quarterback. I think that's the way to go. Just like every team win starts with a great game plan, your future should as well. With life insurance built like a championship roster, Western and Southern helps protect you and your family, so you can focus on winning today, knowing that tomorrow is covered. Whether you're just starting out, building your dynasty, or looking to lock in long-term protection, their coverage options are designed to match your game plan. Visit westernsouthern.com/PFF to get your free life quote and start building your financial game plan today. Western and Southern, built to win, backed by over 130 years of helping people protect what matters most. The Cleveland Browns are the team that we're starting off with here in the AFC North, and you correctly have offensive line as the very first need. I've been talking about it for months with Cleveland. And when I say months, I mean years, going back to last year as well, when I was like, how are we not investing a little bit more into the offensive line? 32nd in the NFL this past season in pass blocking grade for Cleveland, a far cry from when they were one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. And now they have so many of their starting offensive linemen that have the ability to hit free agency. So we will see what happens there. Wide receiver as well. And then quarterback. What are you doing at quarterback? 32nd overall, dead last in the NFL in total passing grade. What do you think about Cleveland's situation and how they're going to prioritize some of their team needs there?
I mean, just any and all offensive talent. And the tough part is with the Deshaun Watson contract still on the books, they don't have a ton of cap space to work with when it comes to adding veterans. So they're going to be looking for value on the free agent market, but they need to draft multiple players on the offensive line and at wide receiver. I mean, you just talk about, there's a reason this was the worst offense in football. There's several reasons for it, actually, not just one, but they will not be able to function until they have a functional offensive line. They're going to have to figure out that situation. That creates, obviously, the domino effect where life is easier on your quarterbacks and easier on your wide receivers. So I know, oftentimes the Browns quarterback situation is in the spotlight, but right now, I don't think there's a quarterback in the league that could go in there with that supporting cast and do pretty much anything. It wouldn't shock me at all if they doubled up on the offensive line in the first round, or if they went O-line, wide receiver with those two picks. Either way, they need to find a way to start that rebuild on both of those positions.
Yeah, Wyatt Teller already said, announced that he is not coming back, and you've just got so many potential options for them along the offensive line. Both Bitonio's a free agent, Ethan Posic's a free agent, Jack Conklin's a free agent. You've got DeJuan Jones, but how much are you really relying on DeJuan Jones? Cam Robinson's a free agent. It could just look totally different in Cleveland, and I agree with you. It's hard to think that any quarterback could play well in that situation behind that offensive line the way that it played last year and the way that it looks currently heading into free agency. For the Cincinnati Bengals, overall defense, they were 29th in the NFL, then team defensive grade with a 52.6. Interior offensive line was better down the stretch, I will say that, but obviously the Bengals still need to monitor that and make sure that they're protecting Joe Burrow as well as possible. And then a little, you put in here a little diversification beyond just Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I feel like Jamar Chase would tell you, we don't need that. Just give me 20 targets a game. We'll be good to go. And he might be right, honestly. But I do think that that's an interesting point that you threw out there just to get some pass-catching depth that you feel good about. I think a lot of people wanted that to be Jermaine Burton, and very clearly it is not. So defense specifically, I just think overall is interesting for them because linebackers probably where you have the biggest need for this team, right? But you just drafted two last year. You played them all of their rookie seasons, and I think the idea was to just get them that experience for them to be better in year two. So maybe you'll get a veteran linebacker in there, but I don't know how big of a splash they're going to make at linebacker unless they just think these guys were terrible once they started to play them. Yeah, they couldn't get after the passer, but you have Trey Hendrickson in a situation that really feels like it hasn't been resolved over the last couple of years. Shamar Stewart, is he ever going to be the pass rusher that you want him to be? Miles Murphy, you could say the same thing for him, but he'll get a chance to really prove that this upcoming offseason. So it's just the Bengals and their defensive upgrades are just in an interesting spot because they've kind of drafted a lot of these guys already. They just haven't been good. So what do you think that Cincinnati's going to do here?
So the pass rush is absolutely a concern, obviously, especially if they lose Trey Hendrickson. They were one of the worst pass rushers in football. I'm going the other way. I think at linebacker, I think you could take a swing at the top of the market. I think somebody like Devin Lloyd from the Jacksonville Jaguars would be a great fit because not only that, yes, you have two rookies that played a lot of snaps last year, albeit not very well, but you also need a leader on this defense, right? Who can be that guy who can just lead the way and make everyone around him better? I think somebody like Devin Lloyd, who was the third highest graded linebacker in football this past season, playing for a great Jaguars defense. I think he could be that guy, and there's so much defensive line depth in this draft, and there's going to be someone there for them to take at number 10 as an impact player on the defensive line, or if it just so happens even that, say, a Caleb Downs falls to number 10, I would absolutely take him at safety, but I think and even then, Sonny Styles, if he gets to that 10th pick, that could be an option for him. There's a lot of different ways you can go about improving this Bengals defense, but I might attack linebacker in free agency with someone like Devin Lloyd.
I would like it. I just don't know if they're going to do it. I don't think that you're wrong there in how Cincinnati could attack it. I don't know. I kind of felt like they drafted those guys. They will bring in a veteran linebacker, but they kind of just had one, Logan Wilson. They traded him at the trade deadline. Maybe that does mean that they'll make a big splash. Sometimes I can never figure out what the Bengals are going to do anyway. So I guess that'll be interesting to monitor how they go about things. The Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, huge for this team. We saw what the offense was like without DK Metcalf. They absolutely need another wide receiver. I was hoping that was going to be Roman Wilson, but maybe he's just more of a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 for them because he just wasn't able to stand out in a year where he had the opportunities to. Mike McCarthy, the new head coach there, he's going to want multiple wide receivers there to be able to go attack through the air, whether that's Aaron Rodgers or not, whoever is their quarterback. Secondary, 54.7 team coverage grade. That was 21st in the NFL. Joey Porter Jr. actually had a decent season, and James Pierre did as well, but James Pierre is a free agent upcoming. Do they retain him? Is he going to stick around? There's some question marks there. And then offensive line. What are you going to do specifically with Broderick Jones? Broderick Jones, thank you. How much faith do you have in him to be your offensive tackle of the future? I think that these are the correct team needs here for Pittsburgh. And how do you see these changing here for them hitting free agency in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, wide receiver's got to be the obvious one, right? You've got to diversify this passing game beyond DK Metcalf and just throw into the running backs all the time. Kenneth Gainwell, a free agent also, so that could be a story, finding a pass-catching back in the backfield. The offensive line is an interesting one to me, too. This doesn't seem to be getting talked about a lot, but the left side of this offensive line is interesting. Broderick Jones, if he's not going to be replaced this offseason, I think he's going to go into 2026 very much on the hot seat. Got to figure out who's playing left guard with Isaac Seumalo, a free agent. And then if they lost any sort of faith in Jones, could you move Troy Fautanu over to the left side and then find a new right tackle? That's very interesting to me. I think they're set at 3 spots with Fautanu and Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick, but that left side of the offensive line to me is quietly a story in Pittsburgh. It's a little bit unsettled right now.
So the team that I really want to focus on in this division, though, is the Baltimore Ravens. You talked about Tyler Linderbaum being a great fit for, the Chargers, I think. He'd be a great fit for any team that has an interior offensive line need. He's a pending free agent for them, and this is a interior offensive line that did not play very well in Baltimore last season. But Tyler Linderbaum wasn't the reason why. I think that they have the ability to retain him. They will, and I do think that they have that ability because $13.3 million in effective cap space right now. That's just 17th most in the NFL. However, if you figure out what you want to do with Lamar Jackson, you can restructure his contract. You gain $38 million there. Easy. And then depending on what the long-term outlook is with Nnamdi Madubuike, you could restructure his contract. You could restructure Marlon Humphreys as well. And those two combined almost get you another $30 million. So they've got nearly $66 million that they can add to that 13.3 in just restructures of players that you ideally would want to keep on the roster anyway. So it looks like the Ravens could be a player in free agency to really make some noise, which they need to because you mentioned offensive line. They're going to have to re-sign Linderbaum. Defensive line as well. I think this team just overall has to get better along the defensive line. Although if Madubuike is back, that really is a big boost for them. Travis Jones played well down the stretch. You're hoping that Mike Green takes the next step for them. Does Jesse Minter bring back Odafe Owe, who, funny enough, got traded from the Ravens over to the Chargers? And now Minter, who was the defensive coordinator of the Chargers, now he's the head coach with the Ravens. Does he just come back to Baltimore, and do you feel good about that? Wide receiver, though, that's pretty huge for them. I think when you look at those first-round mock draft projections, it really comes down to wide receiver or interior offensive line, right? I think we always see Vega Ioane, the offensive guard from Penn State, for them there in the middle of the first round. But I've started to see a lot more mock drafts of, hey, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate, whichever one of those wide receivers makes it to number 14, if any of them do, they could be options for the Ravens as well at wide receiver. What do you think about this team's needs and how they're set up this offseason?
Yeah, I think they're to be honest, pretty clear and obvious what they need to fix. You mentioned the interior offensive line. Re-signing Linderbaum would be a huge plus, right? And then you could focus more on the guard spots, I think, in the draft. I think you look at this defense especially, they just could not get after the quarterback last year. They need more explosive pass rushers. Obviously, internally, if a guy like Mike Green could step up off the edge, that would be awesome, but they need to continue to look for pass rush help. It's something I ironically, that Jesse Minter was looking for a little bit with the Chargers as well, right? And then I think another key player in that free agent list is Alohi Gilman, who actually Minter coached the first half of the season in LA and then traded him to Baltimore for Odafe Owe, like you mentioned. But bringing him back would, or somebody, whether it's Gilman or another veteran safety, somebody who can allow Kyle Hamilton to keep playing in that down low role like a Nicky Manwari, like he had Derwin James doing out there in LA. I think safety is going to be something they look at in the veteran free agent market as well. Maybe that's keeping Gilman, who's familiar with the system, or maybe going and getting somebody else, but you want to keep Kyle Hamilton as flexible as possible. I think that is a key spot in this defense too.
I agree. Yeah, very similar to that conversation that we had with the Seahawks of just doing what you need to do to allow Nicky Manwari to be flexible. The same thing, obviously, with Kyle Hamilton, somebody who could do a lot for your defense, too. So it'd be interesting to see how they attack interior offensive line beyond Tyler Linderbaum. And then wide receivers, if there's any intriguing wide receivers that hit the market that they feel pretty good about, and how we might be talking differently about their mid-first round pick after free agency, which it seems like they've got the ability to make some good noise there. In the NFC North, the Detroit Lions offensive line, I think just figuring out what you want to do at offensive line, right? I mean, is Tate Ratledge going to stay at guard? Is he moving into center? Are you upgrading guard? Are you thinking about offensive tackle? Like, what are we thinking long-term of the offensive line for the Lions? 29th overall in PFF grade along the offensive line after week 10. It just was not the unit that it had been in years past. Edge defender, right? Who's the complementary piece on the opposite side of the offense or the defensive line? Opposite Aiden Hutchinson, who was the only player, who was the only signed player, the guy who's under contract for the following season with more than 25 pressures. And then cornerback. I know a lot of Lions fans, whenever I've mocked them cornerbacks in mock drafts, they're not really happy about it because they're like, okay, we just drafted Terrion Arnold, Ennis Sherrod Jr. Like they spend a lot on the cornerback position, but these guys have been hurt. They've been unreliable. They haven't been out there. They haven't played to their potential. And because of that, I think that you do have to have the cornerback conversation. I don't know if they're going to dip into that well again. Maybe they'll have faith in the guys that they drafted still, but I do agree with those team needs there. Offensive line, edge rusher, and then cornerback is sort of that wild card there for Detroit.
I wonder if one answer at cornerback there, Trev, would be, looking DJ Reed on the outside too, at a career low coverage grade, but he's been so consistent throughout his career. I wonder if one answer, Amik Robertson is a free agent in the slot. Would you move Terrion Arnold into the slot and maybe try to find another answer on that in that second outside spot? Ennis Rakestraw, we basically haven't seen anything from him in the first 2 years of his career, so I don't know that he can be relied upon with his injuries and things of that nature. Do you find somebody who can play, maybe even a veteran, on the outside and move Arnold inside? Because we know he's comfortable there. He got some reps in there at Alabama, really aggressive player, really good tackler. Could that be an option to kind of rearrange some things? Because you're good at safety with obviously Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, but that's something I might even think about, moving Arnold inside. Maybe it's a more comfortable role for him, and then finding someone with a little more size and man-to-man ability on the outside who can play opposite DJ Reed.
To me, that all comes down to confidence, right? I mean, and that's all that matters for the cornerback position. Like, if you're more comfortable on the outside and confident on the outside, that's where I'm going to play you. If you're more comfortable and confident in the slot, that's where I'm going to play you. So I don't hate the idea. You would just have to have a good – you'd have to feel really good about going to him and saying, like, hey, are you confident in playing in slot? And then you'd probably have to see it on the field. You probably have to see it in training camp, and maybe they've been working him in and out a little bit more. But I don't. It's sort of a similar conversation to the way that we talk about offensive line for this team, right? I mean, like, what's Tate Ratledge doing? Kind of you build it from there. If you can move Terrion Arnold inside of the slot, okay, then you build out the rest of the cornerback room from there. So I do think it's an interesting call out, but it all comes down to confidence, because if he doesn't have confidence to play that spot, that's definitely not something that you want to do, moving a guy at cornerback to something where he's not playing with the utmost confidence. For the Minnesota Vikings, linebacker, they were 28th in the NFL in coverage grade from their linebacker unit, so that does make sense there in the middle of their defense. Safety, who replaces Harrison Smith, right? I mean, Harrison Smith retiring after this season. What's the long-term outlook look like at safety? We've seen safety mocked to them in the mock drafts that we do for Minnesota. And then quarterback, of course. J.J. McCarthy is going to be in the mix as the starter for the upcoming season, but how aggressive are you going to be bringing in a veteran? I don't think they'll draft somebody. This just isn't really the class for it. I think it's much more of like, hey, we're bringing in a veteran. It'll be the veteran and J.J. McCarthy. And then if both of those guys just don't work out, it looks like it could be, famous last words, a really good quarterback class next season. And I think you get more aggressive in 2027 for that. But I do agree, linebacker, safety, and then figuring out the quarterback spot is probably what matters most here for Minnesota.
Yeah, they've pretty much said as much, that they're going to try to find a veteran to come in and compete with McCarthy. It reminds a lot of Indianapolis' situation last year, where it was, yes, we have Anthony Richardson, but we can't just solely rely on him to be our starter right now. McCarthy just hasn't shown enough between the injuries and mostly ineffectiveness through his first 2 years that, we don't know that he's gonna be their franchise quarterback. Maybe so. And they went 9-8 this year, even with the dysfunction at quarterback that they had this year. That's how good Kevin O'Connell is running that offense. But I do think they're going to bring in veteran help for McCarthy. And then I think in general, the theme for this defense, to me, the middle of the field, right? I think at defensive tackle, they could stand to add another good run defender alongside Jalen Redmond and those veteran pass rushers they have. They have Eric Wilson, who's a free agent at linebacker, and Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman have really struggled to cover. And then you mentioned it, who replaces Harrison Smith and that leadership at safety. I think they have a lot of questions to answer right in the middle of their defense.
Green Bay offensive line, they're 23rd in the NFL with a 66.6 PFF overall offensive line grade last season. Linebacker as well. You've got Quay Walker, who's hitting free agency. You love Edgerrin Cooper and how athletic he is and everything that he could do sort of as that spy and somebody who, man, if he gets to keep things in front of him, he can really contain a quarterback. He can really cover running backs out of the backfield. I mean, you feel pretty good about him as a downhill coverage defender, but getting somebody next to him, I think, is important. I agree. Although Tyron Hopper played really well last preseason. I'll just shout that out. I don't know if he's going to be, I don't know if it's like, hey, now we got Tyron Hopper, we're good to go. We're going to put him right where Quay Walker is, but I'll just shout him out. I felt like he had a really good preseason, so somebody to at least keep an eye on going into next season. And then overall pass rush, right? What is this team's pass rush? When Micah Parsons was not on the field, it just was not good from them. So you can't trade for Parsons and then expect for him to be just a one-man show. Now, he can be at times, but you got to have some more help around him. So pass rushing, I agree, linebacker, and then figuring out what do you have along the offensive line? Is there anything specific? Well, I mean, wide receiver too for this team with a lot of unknown. Romeo Doubs sitting free agency. Dontavian Wicks, I think, is a free agent for this team, right?
I know
correctly?
Dobbs is. Hang on, I'm gonna pull it up right now. I
feel like wide receivers got the potential for a lot of turnover here.
Dobbs and Bo Melton. Wicks is not.
Okay,
so you've got Wicks and Golden and Jaden Reed and Christian Watson still.
All right, then
I feel at least decent about that room.
Yeah, you should. So offensive line, linebacker, pass rush. What do you think about those needs there?
I think pass rush, definitely they need some depth, because it was clear as day that after Micah Parsons got hurt that the pass rush just fell apart. And also with Jonathan Gannon coming in as their defensive coordinator, we'll see what that defensive line looks like and what types of fronts are going to be playing. I was just thinking about, as far as the linebacker idea, is this a team who with, call it Super Bowl aspirations really with this window, Jordan Love, you got Micah Parsons making all the money. Is this the team that brings in one of these older linebackers who are more effective to just get that leadership going, like on a one-year contract, say a Bobby Wagner or a Demario Davis? Could they make a run at one of those guys and place them next to Edgerrin Cooper so they don't have to worry about, okay, do we need to draft a linebacker? They've got depth in a third guy with Isaiah McDuffie, but I think he profiles as more of a backup and really good special teamer. I wonder if this could be a team that a Bobby Wagner or a Demario Davis looks at and goes, you know what, I'm going to give it a one-year run with that team and see if they can stay healthy and see where it goes.
I think that makes sense from the winning window type of a thing, right? I mean, you could get somebody like that who would be interested in Green Bay's situation. That's not a bad call out. I do kind of like. I'd be worried about the coverage still with Wagner, who scores well in coverage, but a lot of times it's really just he's putting himself in some really good positions. He's still somebody who I think that you could point at and target and take advantage of in coverage. So I wonder though. I think that's a good call out, at least as something to think about for the Packers. Chicago Bears though. Let's focus on the Chicago Bears here a little bit more for this division. When you look at their free agency, they are $9.4 million over the cap right now when it comes to effective cap space. That's just the 24th most in the NFL. However, Bears fans, do not fear. They have a ton of flexibility and potential to get them plenty of cap space. I believe it's close to $80-85 million that they could free up with certain restructures. So they have all the flexibility in the world to get plenty of cap space. to make some noise here. I also think that Tremaine Edmonds and Cole Kmet could potentially be cuts for them. That saves you a good amount of money as well. I'll look up in a second exactly how much that would be, but I think Edmonds was around $15 million. Kmet was about $10 million, so you're freeing up an easy $25 million there if you were thinking about moving on from those guys. Some potential free agents for them, though, some guys who were unrestricted free agents. Nashawn Wright, who had the best year of his career as an outside corner there for them, is his first year as a full-time starter. He's a free agent. Safeties, Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Byard, CJ Gardner-Johnson, all of those guys are unrestricted free agents as well. And then you got to throw in there Braxton Jones, too, because even though it felt like this team was moving on from him when it came to their starting lineup and offensive tackles, I mean, him being around the team, it was nice to have him as a depth player that they could think about. But overall, I think safety, the offensive tackle spots, depending on how you view it, whether it's starter or depth, because of Ozzie Trapillo's injury. And then defensive line overall getting better as at rushing the passer. They had 65.4 pass rush grade this past season. So what do you think about Chicago's offseason coming up here?
It's all about how you go about how they go about improving this defense, right? The pass rush was not very good this year. You've got Montez Sweat, you got an Austin Booker, who I think is a good rotational player, but this defensive line has got to get a lot better. We have mock defensive linemen to them in this draft a lot on this channel here. Safety as well. I don't think there's a single signed safety on their roster right now. They got to figure out if Kevin Byard's coming back, what is Jaquan Brisker going to get on the open market? And then you mentioned it at linebacker. They can save $15 million by cutting Tremaine Edmonds, but do they want to do that, especially with TJ Edwards coming off a major injury? They can get better at all three levels of their defense. I think that has to be a big focus. Their offense, Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, the run game, they showed that they are good enough to make a deep playoff run. They need the defense to be able to match that.
Yeah, I think you were right. I don't think they have a safety who is under contract going in next season. So we know that we're going to touch on that. But yeah, it's also why we see some of those secondary additions when it comes to the mock drafts that we do. A lot of times when we do mock drafts for Chicago, it is pass rusher that we focus on in the first round. But those later picks for them, certainly in the secondary, because you know you're not going to bring back all of those guys. And even if you do, you probably want to get younger guys who are depth players anyway. So we know they're going to be hitting secondary pretty hard. It's just a matter of how hard they're going to do that. Let's move on to the AFC South, Tennessee Titans. Edge defenders, right? I think that's an area where they really have to look to improve. They have Oluwafemi Oladejo, who you drafted in the second round last year, who obviously if you draft in the second round, you're thinking you've got high hopes for. So we'll see sort of how much his presence is in the mix for how desperate they feel to improve the pass rushers. They're going to bring in somebody anyways, but like, is it like, oh, okay, we've got him and now we'll bring in somebody else? Or is it more of a, yeah, we're still looking to fill out this entire rotation there? Cornerback as well. This is a team that desperately needs better corners. And then just overall offensive playmakers. 27th this past season in receiving grade, 28th in rushing grade. And so much like it was for the Jets, to be honest, like it's just a team that needs to continue to acquire talent around their young franchise quarterback in Cam Ward.
I think if you've got a team that, I'm not saying they could go to the Super Bowl or anything like that because that was a crazy run New England had, but if you've got a team that's going into this offseason with the same number of resources that New England had last offseason to improve their roster, it's the Tennessee Titans. They've got the most cap space in football. They've got the 4th overall pick. They don't have a huge bevy of picks necessarily on day 2, but I think when you look at the positions they need and their ability to be able to improve them, I think in the draft, when you look at that 4th overall pick, if they get Reuben Bain or David Bailey, A-plus pick right there off the edge. You know Robert Saleh is going to want to rush for on this defensive line. He's not going to blitz a whole lot, so that's going to be a priority. The cornerback room, they need to add young talent to it. They should be able to do that, whether it be in free agency or the draft. I think a player like a Jalen Watson from Kansas City would be a good fit. A Jamel Dean from Tampa Bay, I think, would be a good fit. And then on the offensive side, I think you just continue to add playmakers for Cam Ward, right? I think the offensive line got a little bit better as the year went on. Kevin Zeitler's a free agency as well, but it's going to be fun to see how Brian Daboll wants to build this offense, especially on the outside at wide receiver. I think this is a team that should really heavily think about Alec Pierce, a free agent from the Colts, right? They need that vertical threat. I like Alec Iamaner. I like what Chimere DK brings with his speed, but I think Alec Pierce would be a really good fit. Steal him away from a division rival. Get Cam Ward a vertical receiver he can work with. We know he wants to sling it down the field. So I think the Titans are going to be among the most active teams in both free agency, and then this draft is going to be a lot of fun for them to watch.
I agree. Rashid Shaheed, you throw him in there as well. Like, okay, Alec Pierce, if you're going to be a player for him, we know he's going to get bagged in a couple of weeks here. So you think about him, you think about Rashid Shaheed. I agree, man. I think that's a really good call out to go out and get a vertical wide receiver like one of those two guys. I love it. In Indianapolis' side of things, quarterback obviously is the big one, right? What's the long-term answer at quarterback? Is Anthony Richardson even on this team going into next year? What are you doing with Daniel Jones as well? The same questions there for him. Linebacker, they were 30th in the NFL in overall PFF grade when it came to their linebackers. And then defensive line, Leatu Latu, DeForest Buckner, only defensive lineman with overall single season grades above 65 last season. So they've got a lot of names, I think, on that defensive line, but is it the impact players that you want there from that unit? So defensive line, linebacker, and then the quarterback spot here for Indianapolis.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and a good amount of cap space right now, $35 million, more than $35 million to work with. And that's really where the focus is going to be. Keep in mind, they don't have a first-round pick for the next 2 years because of the Sauce Gardner trade. So those areas that you're talking about, I think they really need to fix it in the early part of this offseason. Wouldn't be shocked if they're at the top of the linebacker market. We'll see if Daniel Jones wants to come back. Obviously, coming off the injury, you need something in that room, a starting caliber player, and he is that. And then the defensive line, that might be more of a focus, I think, in the draft when you talk about how much defensive line depth that there is. Plus, they drafted JT Tuimoloau in the second round last year. I think quarterback and linebacker are really going to be the two spots that we talk about in the next few weeks for the Colts.
Yeah, I would agree. The Colts, those are the spots outside of the quarterback position, which is just going to be the talk of what in the world do they do there at that spot. Let's talk about Jacksonville next. Pass rush, potentially. Josh Hines-Allen, obviously great for this team, but only defensive lineman with 50 or more pressures or a 70.0 pass rush grade or above. So getting somebody outside of Josh Hines-Allen to be an impact player for them along the defensive line. Travis Etienne is a free agent for them. So running back, you think about, okay, Bashal Tutin, sure, you like him, but is Bashal Tutin going to be a full-time lead back for you? Probably not. You probably got to get somebody else in there. And then what happens to linebacker, right? We've already done this here on this show, and so we've done it many times of putting Devin Lloyd on other teams around the NFL. He's just such a good football player that it's hard to think that Jacksonville would let him go. But if you do, all of a sudden you have a major need at that linebacker spot that you've got to fill. So what happens with Devin Lloyd? What are you going to do at the running back spot? How aggressive are you going to be to either sign a veteran with Bashal Tutin, or are you going to draft somebody as well in this class? And then overall pass rushing here for Jacksonville, a team that, remember, does not have a first-round pick because of the Travis Hunter trade in the draft last year, which it seems as though Travis Hunter is going to be playing full-time corner moving forward and then moonlighting some at that wide receiver spot.
Yeah, the Jags are a weird case because, they only have two players this season going into 2026 that have a cap charge of at least $20 million, Trevor Lawrence and Josh Hines-Allen, and yet they have the third lowest cap space mark in the league, right? So they don't have a whole lot of restructure potential here. It'll be interesting to see where they can really add to this roster on the margins in free agency. Can they afford to keep Devin Lloyd? Can they afford to keep a Travis Etienne, right? I think those are big spots at running back and linebacker that could be key for this team going into next offseason, or I should say next season. If they lose both of those guys, I think you have some serious issues going into this draft. Plus, they need some more pass rush depth, and honestly, any improvements to their interior offensive line would be welcome too, but it feels like they're kind of locked into it contractually with the unit they have now. It's going to be hard for me to see how they can significantly improve, unless they hit some home runs in the middle of this draft, how they can significantly improve in free agency with their cap situation, but they do have multiple needs where they can fill this team out.
They have, I believe it is $43 million in dead cap hits in 2026.
Not great.
Including Tyson Campbell, Gabe Davis, Darnell Savage, Kalen Saunders, all those guys making over $1 million when it comes to dead cap hits. Savage is over $6 million, Gabe Davis is over 14, and Tyson Campbell's at 19.5. So, that's how we get to the situation that Jacksonville is currently in. I do want to focus a little bit more on the Houston Texans for this division specifically. Offensive line, right? I mean, I think that's the thought process here for Houston. And, I saw some people talking on Twitter about this because I did was this a 3-round mock, I think, for the Texans. I think they have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, if I'm remembering correctly. It's 4 or 5. And I took offensive line with 3 out of those 4 picks. And some Houston Texans fans were like, great, throw more darts to throw at the dartboard. And there were some other ones that were like, okay, well, this is bad. Like, we have other needs on the team. And the needs that you pointed out are, okay, offensive line, but also defensive line. You know, they need defensive line additions, especially with Sheldon Rankins, Derek Barnett, and Tim Settle, those guys in the interior defensive line, specifically being free agents. Running back as well. Woody Marks kind of came on as their lead back towards the end, but how do you feel about him going into the season? Ultimately, though, that offensive line is what struggled the most for this team. And when you look at Houston, let's see which offensive linemen are free agents. You've got Ed Ingram, who's a free agent. Trent Brown's a free agent. You have Ariante Ursary, who you feel pretty good about with him as the left tackle. Titus Howard can play a lot of different positions for you, but Jake Andrews, you could upgrade from Jake Andrews. Is Drew Scruggs the upgrade? I'm not so sure he is. Is Jarrett Patterson? I'm not so sure he is. Blake Fisher's kind of had the opportunity to gain a starting spot along the offensive line and has not done so. So Ed Ingram played a little bit better down the stretch in 2025. If you bring him back, okay, I think you got 3 starters along the offensive line, but you have 2 spots that you can very clearly upgrade if you're the Texans. And that's like best case scenario for you, is that you only have 2 starting spots that you really need to upgrade. I think this team needs to hit the gas pedal with the offensive line additions again. I think that was a major issue for them this past season. You feel pretty good about the pass catchers that you have on the team, even with Christian Kirk now as a free agent in a couple of weeks. The defense is fantastic, but yeah, I mean, you could get better along the defensive interior, but I don't know, man. I still think it's got to be all about the offensive line if you're Houston, especially as bad as C.J. Stroud looked down the stretch last year, including into the playoffs.
It's by far priority number 1, right? We've talked about it for 2 years now with this offensive line, especially on the interior. The good news is when it comes to adding talent, I think my mentality for Houston in the first round this year would be just take the best offensive lineman available, whether that's a tackle or it's an interior player, because you have Titus Howard and the flexibility he gives you to play right tackle or to play on the inside, right? So he kind of fills a need somewhere and really wherever you need him to. So that's the good news there. Defensive line, it's more about adding depth, right? Obviously, you have a great D-line starting with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, but just adding that interior depth, really getting the run stoppers going on the inside along with Tommy Togiai, and you mentioned some of the veteran free agents. And then I think this problem will get better when it comes to the offensive line improving too, but I think at running back, right? Nick Chubb is a free agent. You got one okay year out of him. Woody Marks, I do like him a lot, but I like him as more kind of like R.J. Harvey in Denver, more of a complimentary 50-50 type of piece. They won't be at the top of the running back market with a Kenneth Walker or a Breece Hall, but they could find some value in free agency there. They're going to add a veteran or 2 to that room. But you're right, this is about getting better in the trenches, and this offensive line is really the difference between Houston being a playoff team and being a Super Bowl type of team.
Let's move on to the NFC South, the last division that we're talking about here for some pre-free agency team needs. Saints, interior offensive line. Is this something where there's going to be a lot of shakeup or a little bit of shakeup? We don't know. 29th in the NFL in overall PFF blocking grade last season. Interior defensive line as well. Kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, you got names, but how confident are you in that group of names there? 50.9 PFF grade from their defensive tackles. That was just 24th in the NFL. Wide receiver as well. You know, Chris Olave, the only wide receiver on the team with over 500 yards receiving last season. You move on from Rashid Shaheed, so you know there's got to be a wide receiver addition somewhere. I've even started to see it with that top 10 overall pick at number 8 that they have, where I've seen Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate as potential options there for the Saints at wide receiver. You were just in New Orleans for Mardi Gras. Some specific intel. What did the people of New Orleans, what do they want here? What do they think about the team needs for the Saints?
I mean, look, they know there's a lot of needs. There's a lot of optimism for sure. Got hot down the stretch. I think they want an explosive playmaker on offense, right? Actually, you know who was leading one of the parades, I believe, on Sunday night was Drew Brees, right? They want to see an explosive offense like they had with Drew Brees again. Two guys I really think about with that 8th overall pick in the draft. Carnell Tate. I think Tyler Shuck would love throwing a Carnell Tate on the outside. I think the best vertical receiver in this draft. Or you juice up the running game with Alvin Kamara going into the last year of his contract and you take Jeremiah Love. I think think that's the idea. Can we get more explosive playmakers in here on the outside? And then I think especially the interior defensive line is a big problem for me. I like where they're at off the edge with Chase Young and Carl Granderson, but they got to find run stoppers on the inside. And keep in mind, too, at linebacker, Demario Davis is a free agent right now as well. We'll see if he comes back and if they can get him to lead that defense for 1 or 2 more years. But got to get better in the trenches and then got to get more explosive on the outside.
I agree with you. I think I'm leaning more towards wide receiver as that pick at number 8. Just leaning into what the quarterback needs. Now, I talked about some offensive and defensive line. Dylan Radin's free agent for them. Luke Fortner is as well. Landon Young. Those guys. But you still have Eric McCoy. You still have Cesar Ruiz. You still have Nick Saldiveri. You obviously have your tackles in Tulise Fuanga and Kelvin Banks, who are great. So I don't know. Maybe offensive line for them, but I do feel like it's probably going to come down to playmaker. If one of those 3 wide receivers is available, I think you're going to think long and hard about it. Atlanta Falcons, the front 7. I agree with you. I think that's a big-time need, especially with Ellis, Onyemata, Ebiketie, Floyd, all those guys unrestricted free agents in a couple of weeks. Kevin Stefanski, now the new head coach there. You've got the opportunity to really reshape a unit that has been disappointing for you on the defensive side of things. Pass catchers, right? Kyle Pitts is a free agent. What happens there? Do you bring back Kyle Pitts? Does he get a massive bag somewhere else? I have no idea what's going to happen with Pitts, who had a really good rookie season, really disappointing basically rest of the 3 years that were in between after that, and then a really good year last year, one of his best. Drake London was the only wide receiver with more than 450 receiving yards last season, so obviously you've got to get better at pass catcher no matter what, whether Pitts is there or not. Running back depth, Tyler Algier is one of the best RB2s in the NFL. He's hitting free agency as well. Are you bringing him back, or you look at draft his replacement? I agree sort of how you outlined this is the flexibility, and these are the things that you need to think about with the Atlanta Falcons.
No, for sure. I mean, the only thing with them is they have a decent amount of cap space, obviously, and they're going to get rid of Kirk Cousins' contract. I don't know if they'll re-sign him, and you might even need a backup quarterback, obviously, here with Michael Penix's injuries and everything like that. But no, I think certainly to me, the 2 that stand out are replacing some of those veterans in the front 7, or maybe re-signing a couple of them, and then they need depth at wide receiver, especially. Right now, you look at their roster going into 2026, and as far as pass catchers, number 1 is Drake London, and number 2 is really Bijan Robinson, right? They don't have any other viable pass catchers on this team right now, so they need to find some more options for Michael Penix to take some of that pressure off of London and off of Bijan Robinson, because you look at their skill players right now, it is way, way too top-heavy. They have got to find answers. Otherwise, Darnell Mooney with a disappointing season this year, and they don't have a first-round pick. The good news is there's a lot of depth in this wide receiver class. That shouldn't be an issue to find one that they want on day 2, but that's a theme to me. You've got to add offensive depth really at running back, tight end, and receiver.
For the Buccaneers, linebacker is by far their biggest need and what really held them back last season. Whether Levante David comes back or not, they need to prioritize linebacker basically as much as you possibly can. Outside of a Devin Lloyd, maybe a Nakobe Dean. Like maybe Nakobe Dean is somebody who would be interested, or Tampa would be interested in paying him. But even outside of Nakobe Dean, like I could see them signing Nakobe Dean and drafting a linebacker at some point. That's how desperate they should be to upgrade at the second level. So linebacker, huge need for this team. I think edge rusher as well. Some of the edge rushers that they've brought in or drafted just really have not panned out. Yaya Diaby, I think, is a really good heavy-handed type of a 5-technique defensive end, but he's not going to be the closer. He's not going to be a pass rush specialist for you. They need that player. They need a killer coming off of the edge to really be able to get after the quarterback when it matters most late in the fourth quarter. And then potentially tight end. I see that you wrote tight end down here for the Buccaneers. Maybe. I think tight end depth specifically. I know they like Cade Otton, but if you got the ability to maybe even upgrade from that position at the right price in a best player available type of scenario in the draft, maybe they would do it. But I really just think edge rusher, linebacker, those are 2 of the positions that you have to think about the most when it comes to the future.
I think, is Cade Otton not a free agent? Yes, Cade Otton and Ko Kieft are both free agents. So I think they're going to need to at least somewhere find, even if it's re-signing Otton, they got to figure out who the starter is going to be. They need a starting caliber player there, and there could be an upgrade on Otton. Maybe day 2 in the draft, maybe you attack it heavy. You sign Otton to a cheap contract, and then you also take maybe a day 2 tight end. But you're right, edge and linebacker, they got to get better in this front seven. The linebacker play was not good enough this past year, especially in coverage. And then they've got to find a way to pressure quarterbacks without blitzing. We know Todd Bowles can bring it with the blitzes, but to me, when they play more veteran quarterbacks, they have issues because those quarterbacks can see the blitz coming. They know where to go. They have the counter punches to it. Got to be able to rush for and be able to pressure quarterbacks. The Bucs are just not good enough at that right now.
Yep. The last team to talk about here is the Carolina Panthers. Spend some time on the Carolina Panthers here. $7 million in effective cap space as of right now. And they got a lot of decisions to make, I think, specifically along the offensive line. I think Ike Ekwonu tearing his patellar tendon really throws a wrench into this because Cade May is a free agent. Austin Corbett's a free agent. Brady Christensen's a free agent. Josh Nyman's a free agent for this team along the offensive line. I think Carolina's got to figure out, and I'll look in a second, some of the restructure flexibility that they have to get some more cap space in there. But I think of those guys, Mays and Christensen, you probably feel best about wanting to bring back along the offensive line. An offensive line that was really playing well down the stretch and has played really well over the better part of the last couple of seasons, I will say. Offensive tackle Josh Nyman, if you feel good about him at all whatsoever, you kind of have to bring him back because Ike Ekwonu might miss the entire season next year, recovering from that patellar tendon. It just depends. I mean, that's one of the tougher knee injuries to come back from. So if you've got a guy who's got experience in the system and you feel good about him, then yeah, I think that you're bringing him back as well. So to me, it's the offensive line priorities and free agency for them. But yeah, offensive line, which we talked about there, maybe tight end, depending on how they feel about their tight end room. It feels deep with a lot of names, but how do you feel about it? And then linebacker as well, 46.1 overall PFF grade from their linebackers last year. Christian Rosemoom's a free agent in a couple of weeks. That was 29th in the NFL, 29th overall in PFF grade. So what do you think about Carolina here with maybe focusing on the offensive line like I laid out? Do you believe that's the best way for them to go about their cap space as well?
Yeah, I think Cade Mays is the interesting name there because I think he's played reasonably well at center. But the Ike Ekwonu thing, that the injury, that really does throw a wrench. And I think in this entire offseason, I think to the point where left tackle could be a consideration with their first round pick in this draft, right? And I know obviously Ekwonu, I believe, going into his 5th year option year here, and then they have to make a decision beyond that. But I think center and left tackle are two things that really need to get figured out soon because you can't have Bryce Young playing behind a flawed offensive line. We've seen that, and their offensive line, you could argue, has been the best part of their offense for the last 2 years. And then I think defensively, look, this team did improve from being the worst defense in football the year before, but at both defensive tackle and linebacker especially, they need to find a way to improve. I don't think Sonny Styles would get to 19 where they're picking. It doesn't sound like it, but even somebody like a CJ Allen to really be the new leader on that defense, I'd expect them to sign a veteran from somewhere else as well. They need to stabilize the middle of their defense, and they really need to figure out some of the problems they have right now in this offensive line.
Ton of flexibility with restructures, by the way. I mean, Derek Brown, Robert Hunt, J.C. Horn, Trayvon Merrick, Taylor Moton, Tershawn Wharton, Damian Lewis, all of these guys have potential restructures that can gain them cap space between $5 and $12 million. So that's a lot of flexibility that you have. So Carolina, I think, is going to have the ability to kind of do whatever they want with the guys that are pending free agents for them, and then make some additions outside. Maybe it is signing an impact tight end that might be out there. You know, Isaiah Likely is a pending free agent as well. We talked about Kyle Pitts too. Maybe those guys are options. If Dallas Goedert ends up hitting the open market, he's another option for them to potentially upgrade there. Maybe they could take a swing at the best linebacker overall that's going to hit free agency. So I think Carolina, a team that obviously won the NFC South and made the playoffs, is going to have an ability to, it's hard to say put a better team out there than what they did last year, given Ike Ekwonu's not going to be there. But I think overall, they're going to be able to improve the talent and the floor of their team in a lot of different ways. There we go. So 3 needs for all 32 teams in the NFL. Man, that was a lot of information that we got through here on this show. If you guys want to see a lot of those numbers that we talked about for yourself, you, of course, can do so with a PFF Plus subscription. Subscribe.pff.com is the best way to get to that. Of course, this is team needs pre-free agency. So in a couple of weeks, when things really change, when we get to see some of those re-signings and guys moving from one team to the other, then we will update the team needs and we will get to talk about it a little bit more from a draft perspective. For everybody behind the glass producing this show, for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the PFF NFL Show. See you guys next time.